The black car skidded violently around the curve, leaving tire marks on the wet asphalt. In a split second, James Harrison's life transformed into a nightmare of twisted metal and shattered glass. The vehicle rolled 3 times before crashing into the guardrail, leaving a trail of destruction that contrasted with the elegance of the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Minutes earlier, in his penthouse office at Harrison Enterprises, James had made his final call. "Everything is set for tomorrow," he said, his voice betraying an unusual urgency. "If anything happens to me, you know what to do." The phone still rested on his desk when he entered the elevator, nervously adjusting the navy blue tie his late wife had given him on his last birthday. At Cedar Grove Public School, teacher Sarah Mitchell was organizing her classroom for another day when the first news of the accident began to circulate. At 32 and with an unwavering dedication to special education, Sarah could never have imagined that morning would change her life forever. Marcus, James Harrison's 8-year-old son, sat at his usual desk, scribbling something in his notebook with disturbing intensity. The night before, during art class, the boy had produced an unsettling drawing, a black car falling from a cliff, surrounded by menacing shadows. "Miss Mitchell?" Marcus's voice trembled as he approached her desk before classes began. "Can I tell you a secret? It's about my father." The sound of sirens cut through the air, interrupting the boy's confession. Through the hallways, staff members ran with phones in hand, sharing news of the accident. On the small TV in the teacher's lounge, live footage showed the vehicle's wreckage while paramedics fought to stabilize James Harrison. Marcus's face turned pale as he recognized his father's car. "He knew," the boy whispered, clutching Sarah's skirt. "Daddy said they would come after him." At Central Hospital, Dr. Thomas Reynolds frowned while examining James's skull x-rays. "Something's not right," he muttered to his assistant. "These marks on the brake system. They appear to have been tampered with." In the Harrison Enterprises boardroom, Robert Walsh, vice president and supposed trusted friend of James, called an emergency meeting. His typically serene face was tense as he distributed folders to board members. "Gentlemen," he began, "what I'm about to reveal explains why James Harrison needed to be silenced." Sarah watched Marcus through her classroom window, where the boy now slept on the small reading sofa. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number: "Take care of the boy. The red folder contains everything you need to know. James trusts you." The mystery deepened when James Harrison's lawyer arrived at the school. Richard Bennett, a middle-aged man with keen eyes, handed Sarah a sealed envelope. "Mr. Harrison left specific instructions in case something like this happened. You've been chosen as Marcus's temporary guardian." "Why me?" Sarah asked, stunned. "I'm just his teacher." "Because," Bennett replied, lowering his voice, "you're the only person outside the corporate circle that James trusts. And after what he discovered about the company, that trust is worth more than gold." At the end of that day, Sarah took Marcus to her modest third-floor apartment in a building without an elevator. The boy carried only his school backpack and one item he insisted on bringing: the mysterious red folder his father had mentioned. While Marcus showered, Sarah examined the folder's contents. Her eyes widened as she discovered documents detailing an elaborate fraud network involving Harrison Enterprises' medical research division. There was also a handwritten letter addressed to her from James. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means my suspicions were correct. In recent months, I discovered something terrible happening within my own company. Project Aurora, our revolutionary treatment research initiative, is being used as a front for something far more sinister. I'm entrusting Marcus to you not only because of your dedication as a teacher but because you're the only person who has shown genuine concern for his well-being, without ulterior motives. In the coming days, dangerous people will come looking for this information. Protect my son. Protect the truth. James Harrison." At the hospital, James remained in a deep coma, his vital signs stable but concerning. Dr. Reynolds noticed something strange in his toxicology reports: traces of an unidentified substance in his blood. At Harrison Enterprises, lights still glowed in some offices. Robert Walsh made frantic calls, his voice alternating between threatening whispers and reassuring guarantees. On his desk, a photo showed him and James in happier times fishing on a distant lake. With an abrupt movement, Walsh turned the photo face down. Sarah prepared the guest room for Marcus, watching as the boy methodically organized his belongings, a habit he had surely inherited from his father. Before bed, he took something from his backpack: a golden key attached to a cord. "Daddy gave me this last week," Marcus explained, his voice small in the darkness of the room. "He said it was the key to everything, but that I should only use it when absolutely necessary. That night, as the city slept, different pieces of a deadly game began to move. At the hospital, an unknown nurse checked James's room. At Harrison Enterprises, important documents silently disappeared. And at Sarah's apartment, a shadow watched her windows from across the street. The first day after the accident ended with more questions than answers. Sarah, lying in her bed, couldn't sleep. Her mind spun between the day's revelations and the responsibility she now carried. In the room next door, Marcus had finally fallen asleep, the golden key firmly gripped in his hand. The city continued its nighttime routine, oblivious to the drama unfolding in its depths. But in the shadows, gears were already in motion. Gears that would transform Sarah Mitchell's life forever and reveal truths that James Harrison had tried to protect until his last moment of consciousness. The next morning brought with it a fine, persistent rain. Sarah woke with a start to the sound of the doorbell. On the clock, red numbers showed 6:15. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a dark suit, holding a black umbrella. "Miss Mitchell? I'm Michael Chin from Harrison Enterprises Corporate Security." The voice sounded professional, but something in his tone sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "We need to discuss young Marcus's situation." Sarah kept the chain lock in place as she partially opened the door. "I have legal documents establishing my temporary guardianship. Any discussion needs to go through Mr. Harrison's lawyer." "I understand your caution." Chin smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "But there are security protocols that need to be implemented. Marcus's safety is our top priority." In the bedroom, Marcus appeared sleepily, still in his pajamas. Seeing the man at the door, his eyes widened with fear. "Don't let him in," he screamed, running to hide in the bathroom. "He was in Daddy's office that night?" Sarah shut the door immediately, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the wood, Chen's voice sounded colder. "You're making a mistake, Miss Mitchell. Some doors, once closed, cannot be reopened." At the hospital, Dr. Reynolds examined James Harrison's latest tests. The patterns in the toxicology results disturbed him, a pattern he had seen before in a case filed years ago. He opened his laptop, quickly typing a search in the medical database. "Doctor," his assistant rushed into the room, "someone from Harrison Enterprises is here. They say they need to review Mr. Harrison's personal effects." Reynolds abruptly closed his laptop. "Tell them they need a court order. And Amanda, don't mention the toxicology test to anyone." Sarah managed to convince Marcus to leave the bathroom after almost an hour. The boy was shaking, clutching the golden key he wore around his neck. He was yelling at Daddy, he whispered. About something called Project Aurora. The red folder was still hidden where Sarah had stored it the night before, behind a stack of textbooks. She opened it again, studying the documents more carefully. Among graphs and financial reports, a photo caught her attention. James Harrison next to a woman in a white lab coat, both smiling in front of a laboratory. On the back, a note, "Claire Sullivan, the key to everything. 2023. "Marcus," Sarah called softly, showing the photo to the boy. "Do you know this woman?" Marcus's face lit up with recognition. "Dr. Claire. She always brought chocolates when she visited Daddy. But she stopped coming after she found something bad on the computer." At Harrison Enterprises, Robert Walsh conducted another tense meeting. "Project Aurora cannot be compromised," his voice echoed in the boardroom. "Years of research, millions in investments. We cannot allow James's discoveries to destroy everything." "What about Dr. Sullivan?" one of the executives asked nervously. "Claire Sullivan is no longer a concern," Walsh answered dryly. "Focus on locating that folder. And the boy, we need to ensure he's under our supervision." Sarah decided not to send Marcus to school that day. While the boy drew at the kitchen table, she researched Claire Sullivan on her laptop. The scientist had worked as chief researcher in Harrison Enterprises Medical Division until 6 months ago, when she abruptly resigned. An old email in the red folder caught her attention, an exchange between James and Claire. "James, what we discovered in Project Aurora is just the tip of the iceberg. They're using the research for something far more dangerous. Meet me at our usual cafe tomorrow, 3 p.m. Bring a secure flash drive. Don't trust Walsh. Claire." The email was dated 1 week before Claire's resignation. Sarah picked up her phone, hesitating before dialing Dr. Reynolds' number, who had left his card with James's contact information. After 3 rings he answered. "Doctor, this is Sarah Mitchell, James Harrison's son's guardian. I need to know, have you heard of Claire Sullivan?" A heavy silence preceded the response. "Miss Mitchell, we shouldn't discuss this over the phone. Meet me at the hospital cafe in an hour. And come alone." Sarah looked at Marcus, now sleeping on the couch, his hands still holding colored pencils. The golden key gleamed on his neck, reflecting the morning light. She picked up her phone again, this time calling Denise, her colleague and closest friend. "I need a huge favor," Sarah said. "Can you come stay with Marcus for a few hours? It's important." "And Denise? Don't open the door for anyone from Harrison Enterprises." At the hospital cafe, Dr. Reynolds was already waiting, a brown folder on the table. "What I'm about to show you," he said as soon as Sarah sat down, "could put our lives at risk. But James Harrison was my friend and he deserves justice." He opened the folder, revealing a series of tests and reports. The accident wasn't an accident. We found a synthetic substance in his blood, the same one found in another case 6 months ago. An overdose disguised as suicide. He paused, his eyes meeting Sarah's. "Claire Sullivan's case." Sarah felt the air escape from her lungs. "Claire is dead?" "Officially, yes. But something tells me James knew more about this. And now you, Miss Mitchell, are at the center of everything." When Sarah returned to the apartment, she found Denise and Marcus playing chess. The boy seemed calmer, almost normal, if not for the way his eyes constantly turned toward the window. "There was another man here," Denise whispered while Marcus put away the game. "Said he was from the police, wanting to ask questions about the accident. I didn't let him in." Sarah thanked her friend and after she left, sat with Marcus on the couch. The boy played absently with the golden key. "Marcus," she began gently, "do you know what this key is for?" He nodded slowly. "Daddy said it opens a special place. A place where he kept important things about the bad project. But I can only use it when it's very, very necessary." Night fell over the city, bringing with it a darkness that seemed denser than usual. At the hospital, James Harrison remained in his deep sleep, oblivious to the forces moving around him. In his room, a new nurse checked the monitors, her eyes alert to every change in vital signs. At Harrison Enterprises, lights still shone on the executive floor. Robert Walsh was on the phone. "No, we haven't found the folder yet. But we have a new complication. It seems the teacher made contact with Reynolds." "Yes, sir. I understand. It will be done?" Sarah lay in her bed that night, her mind spinning with the day's revelations. Beside the bed, her phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Claire Sullivan is alive. And she has the answers you seek. Old abandoned factory, tomorrow midnight. Come alone." In the next room, Marcus slept, the golden key softly gleaming under the moonlight that came through the window. In the night silence, the distant sound of footsteps echoed on the building's fire escape, slowly climbing toward Sarah's apartment. The message about Claire Sullivan tormented Sarah throughout the early morning hours. At 3 a.m., the sound of footsteps on the fire escape made her jump out of bed. She ran to Marcus's room only to find him awake, sitting on his bed with his eyes fixed on the window. "They always come at night," whispered the boy. "Daddy put cameras all over the house after Dr. Claire left." A metallic noise echoed through the fire escape. Sarah acted quickly, grabbing Marcus and heading to the bathroom, the only room without windows. They had barely closed the door when they heard the distinct sound of a window being forced open. "The key," Marcus whispered, trembling. "Daddy said in case of emergency I should use the key." Sarah hesitated only for a moment before grabbing her phone and car keys. From the sounds, there were at least 2 people searching the apartment. The bathroom had a small transom window that opened to the building's internal corridor, tight for an adult, but sufficient for a child. "Marcus, I need you to be very brave now," Sarah whispered, helping him climb onto the sink. "I'm going to pass you through the transom. Run to the car and don't look back." The boy nodded, his eyes wide with fear but determined. Carefully, Sarah lifted him to the opening. Marcus slid silently to the other side, his small hands clutching the golden key. The intruders were getting closer to the bathroom. Sarah could hear their muffled voices. "The folder has to be here somewhere. Walsh wants it and the boy by dawn." Sarah waited until she heard Marcus's light footsteps moving away down the corridor before abruptly opening the bathroom door, surprising the 2 men. She ran toward the front door, knocking over a bookshelf to slow them down. In the building's garage, Marcus was already crouched beside the car. Sarah remotely unlocked the doors and they both quickly got in. The engine roared to life just as the 2 men emerged from the fire escape. "Where are we going?" asked Marcus, clutching his seatbelt as Sarah maneuvered the car out of the garage. "To find out what your key opens," Sarah replied, her eyes alternating between the street ahead and the rearview mirror, where a black sedan was beginning to follow them. At the hospital, Dr. Reynolds received an urgent call. "Doctor, Mr. Harrison's vital signs are changing. It seems he's trying to wake up. Reynolds rushed to James's room, only to find Robert Walsh already there, talking to a nurse he didn't recognize. Just following company security protocols, Walsh smiled but his eyes remained cold. Sarah drove through the empty pre-dawn streets, her heart pounding as she tried to shake the car following them. Marcus held the key tightly, his eyes fixed on something only he seemed to see. There, he suddenly pointed to an old building at the docks. "That's where Daddy would take me sometimes. He said it was our secret place." The building looked abandoned, but Sarah noticed discreet security cameras at strategic points. She parked in the back away from the street lights. "Marcus, are you sure this is it?" The boy nodded, already running toward a side door. The golden key fit perfectly in the lock. Inside, the environment was surprisingly modern, a shocking contrast to the deteriorated exterior. State-of-the-art monitors and equipment occupied a room that looked like a command center. Claire quickly inserted a device into the central computer. "We need full access to the main server." James developed his own security system after we discovered Project Aurora's true intentions. As the files transferred, Claire explained the project's true nature in detail. It started as legitimate research into innovative neurological treatments. We were developing a way to reactivate damaged neural connections in patients with brain injuries. Sarah watched the monitors where detailed graphs and reports appeared in sequence. But something changed? Walsh, Claire clenched her fists. He saw the potential for something more sinister. Instead of healing, the treatment could be modified to control. Imagine a substance that allows you to influence thoughts, memories, decisions. The power to literally reprogram the human mind. Marcus, who was near the window keeping watch, whispered urgently, "More cars are coming." Claire intensified the transfer speed. James discovered that Walsh was already testing on patients without consent. Vulnerable people without family, easy to make disappear if something went wrong. At the hospital, the situation with James Harrison was becoming increasingly tense. Dr. Reynolds, observing from afar, noticed something strange in the new nurse's behavior. Her movements were mechanical, her eyes empty. As if she were programmed. "My God," he muttered, remembering the toxicology reports. Running to his office, Reynolds began gathering all the evidence he had collected about the suspicious cases from recent months. Claire showed Sarah a series of confidential documents. Walsh built an entire network within the company. Doctors, scientists, even government employees, all compromised with the project or converted through the treatment. "That's why Daddy was different in the last few weeks," Marcus commented, surprising both women with his insight. He found out that Uncle Robert was hurting people. The sound of doors being broken down upstairs made them all jump. Claire quickly finished the data transfer and handed 2 flash drives to Sarah. "This one contains all the evidence, records, videos, names. The other has coordinates to a safe place. Look for Elizabeth Morgan in Pine Grove. She's a former colleague who left the company before all this started. She'll know what to do." Sarah stored the devices and held Marcus's hand firmly. "Are you sure you won't come with us?" Claire smiled sadly. "Someone needs to ensure they don't recover anything from these servers. Besides," she hesitated, "the experimental treatment I used to fake my death had side effects. I don't have much time." Marcus hugged Claire one last time, silent tears rolling down his face. "Will you meet Dr. Claire in heaven like Mommy?" he asked, his voice small and trembling. Sarah's heart tightened at the innocent question. Claire kissed the boy's forehead. "You're as special as your father always said. Now go use the tunnel passage. There's an exit that leads to the old lighthouse." As Sarah and Marcus disappeared through the secret passage, Claire initiated the system's self-destruct sequence. The screens began flashing with red warnings and a timer appeared, 3 minutes until total overload. On the upper floor, Walsh personally coordinated the operation. "Search everything. Sullivan is here somewhere and she has too much information to stay alive." Claire, alone in the main room, watched the monitors one last time. On one of the screens, an old photo showed her, James and Marcus in happier days, before ambition and greed transformed Harrison Enterprises into something monstrous. The timer reached 0 at the same moment the room's door was broken down. Walsh entered, followed by 2 armed men. Claire was sitting calmly in her chair, smiling. "You're late, Robert," she said softly. As always, the controlled explosion destroyed only the servers and equipment, but the flash illuminated the entire port area. Sarah, guiding Marcus through the damp tunnels, felt the tremor under her feet. The boy stopped for a moment, looking back. "She sacrificed herself for us, didn't she?" he asked, his voice more mature than his years. Sarah hugged the boy, tears in her own eyes. She sacrificed herself for the truth, sweetheart. Like your father tried to do. At the hospital, Dr. Reynolds was finishing copying all important files when he noticed suspicious movement in the hallway. Quickly storing a flash drive in his boot, he barely had time to sit before two Harrison Enterprises security guards entered his office. Dr. Reynolds? You need to come with us. Administrative board's orders. The night was far from over. As Sarah and Marcus emerged from the tunnels near the abandoned lighthouse, the city was beginning to wake to another day, oblivious to the events that had forever transformed the lives of those involved. In Sarah's pocket, Claire's flash drive seemed to weigh a ton, the burden of truth that was now her responsibility to protect. Beside her, Marcus held her hand firmly, the golden key still hanging from his neck, a constant reminder of his father's legacy. The rising sun cast long shadows over the port, where smoke still rose from the abandoned building. Somewhere in the city, Walsh was already organizing his next move. The battle for truth was just beginning, and Sarah knew the next few hours would be crucial for everyone's survival. At dawn, Sarah and Marcus found themselves in a small diner on the outskirts of town. The smell of coffee and fried eggs filled the air, while the first morning customers, mostly truck drivers and night shift workers, occupied the worn formica tables. The boy absently stirred his hot chocolate, the dark circles under his eyes revealing a sleepless night. Sarah kept her eyes alternating between her laptop and the door, carefully examining one of the flash drives Claire had given her. Pine Grove, she murmured, studying the coordinates. It's a small town about 3 hours from here. But first we need to find a safe place to access this information. The diner's TV news caught her attention. Tragedy at the docks, fire destroys abandoned building. Authorities suspect electrical short circuit. A body was found in the rubble, but hasn't yet been identified. Sarah quickly shut down the laptop when she noticed a man in a suit entering the diner. He stood out completely from the simple environment, his impeccable Italian suit contrasting with the work uniforms of other customers. His eyes methodically scanned the place, and Sarah recognized the calculated movement of someone trained to observe. "Let's go," she whispered to Marcus, discreetly guiding him toward the back exit. Through the kitchen window they saw two more black cars parking. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, noticed their nervousness and silently indicated a side door that led to the alley. At the hospital, the situation was equally tense. Dr. Reynolds was being escorted by two Harrison Enterprises security guards when he decided to make his move. "I need to use the bathroom," he said, his hand unconsciously touching the boot where he had stored the flash drive containing evidence he had collected during weeks of discreet investigation. "Be quick," replied one of the guards, positioning himself by the bathroom door, his rigid body betraying military training. Reynolds locked himself in a stall and quickly removed the flash drive. With trembling fingers, he sent a coded text message to a number Claire had given him months ago, when the first suspicions about Project Aurora emerged. The text seemed innocent. "Dinner Sunday? Bring that family recipe." But it was a previously arranged emergency signal. In the Harrison Enterprises boardroom, Robert Walsh conducted an emergency meeting. The luxurious environment contrasted with the palpable tension in the air. Nervous executives fidgeted in their Italian leather chairs while Walsh maintained an artificial calm. "The situation is under control," he assured those present, his voice conveying a confidence he didn't really feel. "Sullivan is dead, this time definitively, and we'll soon have the boy and the teacher." "What about Harrison?" asked one of the board members, a gray-haired man who seemed especially disturbed. "He's beginning to show signs of consciousness. If he wakes up..." Walsh smiled coldly, interrupting the worried speech. "I've already taken care of that. Our CO will have a tragic relapse this afternoon. The doctors will say it was a natural complication after the trauma." Sarah drove cautiously along the coastal road, avoiding major highways where security cameras could track them. Marcus had fallen asleep in the back seat, still holding the golden key as if his life depended on it. The morning sun reflected off the metal, creating small rainbows on the car's ceiling. Her phone vibrated, a message from Dr. Reynolds. "Don't trust anyone from Harrison. Walsh planning something for James today. Have evidence, find Elizabeth Morgan. Watch out for new nurse. She's not who she seems to be." "The nurse?" Sarah murmured, remembering Claire's comment about people converted by the experimental treatment. A shiver ran down her spine as she recalled the empty eyes she had noticed during her hospital visits. She made a sharp turn, deciding to return to the city. She couldn't abandon James Harrison to his fate. At the hospital, the new nurse prepared a syringe with a clear liquid. Her movements were precise, almost robotic, like a machine programmed for a single function. In her mind conditioned by the experimental treatment, only one order echoed repeatedly: eliminate James Harrison. Sarah parked the car a few blocks from the hospital, on a quiet residential street. Marcus, I need you to be very brave again. I'm going to leave you with someone trustworthy while I check something. Don't leave me. Marcus grabbed her arm with surprising strength. Please. Everyone who leaves me ends up getting hurt. Sarah's heart tightened at the obvious fear in the boy's voice. Sweetheart, it's too dangerous. Your teaching assistant, Amanda, lives nearby. She's always taken special care of you. Amanda, a 25-year-old who had shown genuine concern for Marcus throughout the school year, opened the door immediately upon seeing the boy. Her intelligent eyes registered the situation without needing many explanations. He'll be safe with me, she assured Sarah, protectively embracing Marcus. Sarah ran to the hospital, her heart pounding against her ribs. Along the way, she tried calling Dr. Reynolds' cell phone repeatedly, but all calls went to voicemail. Something was terribly wrong. Using her knowledge of hospital routines acquired during frequent visits to Marcus, Sarah managed to enter unnoticed. The ICU corridor was strangely empty, without the usual movement of nurses and doctors. Through James's room window, she saw the nurse preparing something near the floor. Sarah immediately recognized the empty look on her face, the same one Claire had described in the victims of the experimental treatment. It was the look of someone who had lost their own will. Without time to ask for help, Sarah burst into the room. The nurse turned mechanically, the syringe still in hand. You shouldn't be here, she said in a monotone voice, completely devoid of emotion. Neither should you, Sarah replied, advancing cautiously. What did Walsh do to you? What did they do to your mind? The mention of Walsh's name seemed to trigger something deep in the nurse. For a moment, her eyes wavered, as if a buried part of her consciousness fought against the chemical programming controlling her brain. Sarah took advantage of the hesitation to grab the syringe, but discovered the nurse possessed superhuman strength, another side effect of the treatment. In the ensuing struggle, the liquid splashed onto Sarah's arm. Immediately, a sensation of numbness began spreading through her body. Her vision blurred, and distant sounds of footsteps and voices seemed to echo from far away, as if she were submerged in deep water. The last thing Sarah saw before losing consciousness was James Harrison opening his eyes, and a familiar figure rushing into the room, Dr. Reynolds, followed by armed men wearing jackets with the letters FBI. FBI. Everyone freeze. Then darkness enveloped her completely, and Sarah plunged into a world of shadows and whispers, where the boundaries between reality and nightmare began to dissolve. Marcus's distant cry echoed in her mind, mixing with Claire's final words about Project Aurora's true power. Somewhere in that darkness, a familiar voice called her name, but Sarah could no longer distinguish if it was real or just another effect of the substance now running through her veins, threatening to transform her into another puppet without free will in Walsh's deadly game. Sarah floated in a sea of distorted memories. Voices and images mixed in her mind like a broken kaleidoscope. She saw Marcus crying, Claire smiling sadly before the explosion, James Harrison unconscious in his hospital bed. The substance that had entered her system transformed each memory into a vivid nightmare. Sarah? Sarah, can you hear me? Dr. Reynolds' voice seemed to come from very far away. We need to stabilize her before the compound takes complete control. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like they were made of lead. Her entire body was heavy, and every coherent thought slipped through her fingers like water. In the next room, FBI agents were interrogating the programmed nurse, who was now sedated and restrained. Special Agent David Cooper, a middle-aged man with keen eyes, coordinated the operation. We'd been monitoring Harrison Enterprises for months, Cooper explained to Dr. Reynolds. Claire Sullivan was our informant. She faked her own death to continue investigating from the inside. And now she's really dead, Reynolds replied bitterly, checking Sarah's vital signs. Just like Miss Mitchell will be if we can't reverse the compound's effects. In the hallway, James Harrison was being transferred to a maximum security unit. His eyes, now open, revealed a frightening lucidity. Marcus, was his first word. Where is my son? At Amanda's house, Marcus refused to eat or sleep. Something inside him knew Sarah was in danger. The golden key around his neck seemed to pulse with a silent urgency. I need to go to the hospital, he insisted for the 10th time. Daddy always said the key was important. There's something in the code that... Amanda watched the boy with growing concern. Marcus, it's too dangerous. Sarah made me promise to keep you safe. "But you don't understand," Marcus shouted, tears streaming down his face. "The key isn't just a key. It's a code to reverse what they did. Daddy explained it to me in case something like this happened." At Harrison Enterprises, Robert Walsh received the news of the FBI raid with disturbing calm. On his desk, a screen showed several monitoring windows, including one of Amanda's house. "The boy still has the key," he spoke into the phone. "And apparently he knows how to use it. James must have anticipated all of this." "Yes, sir. I understand. I'll mobilize the team immediately." At the hospital, Sarah began having seizures. Her body fought against the compound trying to rewrite her neural synapses. Dr. Reynolds worked frantically trying to stabilize her. "It's happening faster than normal," he explained to Agent Cooper. "It's as if the compound had been modified, made more aggressive." "Walsh must have perfected the formula," Cooper replied, watching the monitors with concern. "We need that key." Claire's notes indicated that James Harrison developed an antidote, but hid it in an algorithm. At that moment, Amanda ran into the ICU, breathless and pale. "Marcus ran away," she announced, leaning against the wall. "He said something about the key being a code and just disappeared." Panic spread through the unit. FBI agents began searching the hospital, while Reynolds tried to keep Sarah stable. James Harrison, hearing about his son's disappearance, tried to get up from the bed, only to be restrained by security. "You don't understand," he protested, his voice hoarse from disuse. "The code is incomplete without Marcus. I programmed it to respond only to his DNA. It's the only way to prevent Walsh from using it." In the city center, Marcus walked determinedly toward the hospital. The golden key gleamed under the afternoon sun, and in his mind, sequences of numbers and letters that his father had made him memorize began to make sense. Walsh watched everything through the city's security cameras, coordinating his teams to intercept the boy. "Bring him alive," he ordered. "We need him and the key intact." At the hospital, Sarah began muttering disconnected words. Her body trembled and the monitors beeped frantically. "We're losing her," Reynolds announced, preparing the defibrillator. It was at that moment that Marcus ran into the room, breathless and sweaty. His eyes widened at Sarah's condition, but his expression was one of absolute determination. "I know how to save her," he said, removing the key from his neck. "Daddy taught me. It's like a computer game, but with real life." James Harrison, who had convinced the agents to bring him to Sarah's room, watched his son proudly. "The antidote is in the algorithm, son. Do you remember the sequences?" Marcus nodded, inserting the key into a disguised USB port in the medical equipment, a modification James had secretly implemented in several hospitals as a precaution. "Red, blue, green, yellow," Marcus recited, typing a complex sequence. "Like the sunset colors at the lake house." The monitors flickered, and a hidden program began to run. The golden key glowed intensely as if alive, while the medical system began pumping a new compound into Sarah's body. "Walsh is here," Cooper suddenly announced, his weapon already drawn. He wouldn't come personally unless... The room's door exploded and armed men invaded the space. Walsh entered last, his impeccable suit contrasting with the chaos around him. "Impressive, James," he smiled coldly. "Using your own son as the key to the algorithm. But you forgot one crucial detail?" Walsh raised his hand, revealing a syringe with a bright red liquid. "Project Aurora was never about mind control. It was about forced evolution. And thanks to your experiments, we finally perfected it." Before anyone could react, Walsh injected the syringe's contents into his own neck. His eyes began to glow with an unnatural light, and his body shook violently. "Now," he smiled, his voice changing into something inhuman, "let's see who really controls humanity's future." The ensuing chaos was interrupted by a soft sound. Sarah was waking up, her eyes slowly focusing on the surreal scene before her. The antidote had worked, but she was awakening to an even greater nightmare than the one she'd just escaped. Chaos erupted in the hospital room. Walsh, his body convulsing with the experimental substance's effect, emanated a disturbing aura of power. His men formed a protective circle around him, weapons aimed at the FBI agents. Sarah, still weak but conscious, pulled Marcus behind her bed. James Harrison tried to move to protect his son, but the coma's effect still limited his movements. "You don't understand," Walsh spoke, his voice distorted. "Project Aurora wasn't about controlling minds, it was about evolution. About transcending the limits of human consciousness." Agent Cooper kept his weapon steady, even realizing that conventional bullets might be useless against what Walsh had become. "Everyone back," he ordered. "Evacuate the floor." Too late, Walsh smiled, his eyes now completely black. With a movement impossible to follow, he crossed the room and grabbed Marcus by the arm. "The boy comes with me," he announced. "He's the final key, literally. The perfect DNA to complete the transformation." Sarah, driven by a fierce protective instinct, ripped the tubes from her arm and launched herself at Walsh. "Let him go," she shouted, her own strength enhanced by the remnants of the compound in her system. Dr. Reynolds took advantage of the distraction to trigger a silent alarm. Within seconds, FBI special tactical teams began positioning themselves in the corridors. "Dad!" Marcus shouted, still firmly holding the golden key. "The reverse code. Like at the lake." James Harrison understood immediately. While everyone focused on Walsh, he began typing a sequence into the medical equipment where the key was inserted. Walsh realized too late what was happening. A specially designed electromagnetic pulse emanated from the key, affecting only organisms altered by the Aurora compound. The effect was instantaneous. Walsh fell to his knees, his eyes returning to normal as his body violently rejected the modifications. His men, many also under the influence of weaker versions of the compound, began to collapse. Sarah seized the moment to pull Marcus away, while FBI agents stormed the room. "Everyone on the ground," they shouted, quickly subduing Walsh's guards who were still conscious. "How?" Walsh murmured, his voice now normal but weak. "The code was perfect?" "No," James replied, his voice heavy with sadness for his former friend. "You forgot the human element, Robert. A father's love for his son, something no algorithm can replicate." Dr. Reynolds was already preparing antidotes for everyone affected by the compound, using the formula that the key's code had revealed. "It will take time," he explained to Agent Cooper, "but everyone can be cured." Sarah hugged Marcus tightly, silent tears rolling down her face. The boy returned the embrace, finally allowing himself to relax after so much fear and tension. "Is it over?" he asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah replied, exchanging a meaningful look with James. "It's over." In the weeks that followed, the truth about Project Aurora came to light. The press had a field day with revelations about illegal experiments and corporate conspiracies. Harrison Enterprises underwent a complete restructuring, with James taking control again after his recovery. Walsh and his accomplices faced justice. During the trial, it became clear that his obsession with power and transcendence had corrupted research that originally aimed to help people with neurological diseases. Claire Sullivan's sacrifice was recognized and honored. Her collaboration with the FBI had been crucial in exposing the truth and saving countless lives. Sarah remained close to the Harrison family. Her bond with Marcus had strengthened through the trials they faced together. James, grateful for everything she had done for his son, offered her a position in the new foundation he created, dedicated to using technology to genuinely help people. The golden key was stored in a special vault, a constant reminder of how love and courage can overcome even the darkest ambitions. On a quiet afternoon months later, Sarah watched Marcus playing in the Harrison mansion's garden. The boy seemed to have finally regained the joy proper to his age. James approached, leaning slightly on a cane, a reminder of his time in a coma. "You know," he commented, "sometimes I think the real Project Aurora wasn't about control or evolution." "No?" Sarah asked, intrigued. "No," he smiled, watching his son. "It was about finding light in the darkness. About how ordinary people can become extraordinary when they choose to do the right thing, no matter the cost." Sarah nodded, understanding. Her life had changed completely since that first morning in the classroom, when a small shy student needed her help. Now, looking to the future, she knew that some changes, however frightening they may seem at first, are exactly what we need to find our true purpose. The golden key rested in its vault, its secret now part of a larger story, a story about courage, sacrifice, and the transformative power of love and truth. A year had passed since the events that exposed the truth about Project Aurora. The former Harrison Enterprises headquarters had been completely transformed, its imposing glass facade now displaying a new name: Claire Sullivan Foundation for Medical Innovation. The building, once a symbol of unbridled ambition, had become a beacon of hope for the medical and scientific community. Sarah coordinated the foundation's educational program, developing innovative initiatives for young people interested in science and technology. Her experience as a teacher proved invaluable in translating complex concepts into accessible lessons, and her work was inspiring a new generation of ethical and conscious scientists. In the building's East Wing, a permanent memorial had been erected in honor of the original Project Aurora's victims. Photos, names, and stories filled the walls, reminding all visitors of the price of limitless ambition. At the center, a portrait of Claire Sullivan dominated the space, her serene smile contrasting with the sacrifice she had made. On a sunny spring morning, Sarah watched Marcus present his science project to a visiting class. The boy, now 10, had inherited not only his father's sharp intelligence but also a strong sense of social responsibility that surprised everyone who knew him. The most important thing in science, Marcus explained to the other students, his voice clear and confident echoing through the auditorium, is remembering that each discovery must serve to help people, not control them. My father and Dr. Claire taught me that the true power of science lies in how we choose to use it. James, who watched discreetly from the door, smiled with pride. His recovery had been complete, although he sometimes still used the cane more for precaution than necessity. The last few months had been dedicated to transforming the company into something that really made a difference in the world. Dr. Reynolds, now Director of Neurological Research, had achieved something remarkable, adapting beneficial aspects of Project Aurora for legitimate treatments. His discoveries were helping patients with brain injuries recover lost functions, the original goal that Walsh had distorted for his own ends. The results are promising, Reynolds frequently explained in his lectures. We managed to isolate the therapeutic elements of the compound, completely eliminating the potential for mind control. This is science as it should be, healing, not controlling. The transformation wasn't limited to just the company. The entire city seemed different, as if it had awakened from a long nightmare. The abandoned building at the docks was demolished, and in its place arose a public park with a memorial dedicated to Claire Sullivan. In the park center, a bronze statue portrayed her in her lab coat, looking toward the horizon with determination. Sarah kept the golden key in a special vault in her office, protected by state-of-the-art security systems. Although its original purpose had been fulfilled, it served as a constant reminder that the greatest victories don't always come through force, but through the courage to do what's right. Robert Walsh was serving his sentence in a maximum security facility, where he also received treatment to reverse the effects of the experimental compound. The latest news indicated he was beginning to show genuine remorse for his actions, though the path to redemption was long. The former Harrison Enterprises executives who had participated in the conspiracy also faced justice. Some made plea deals, revealing an even larger network of corruption that extended to other corporations. The investigations continued, cleaning up the corporate world one company at a time. On a particular afternoon, after a long planning session for the new school year, Sarah found Marcus alone in the Foundation's garden, contemplating the sunset that painted the sky in shades of gold and purple. Thinking about Dr. Claire? She asked softly, sitting beside him on the wooden bench that had been installed in memory of the scientist. Marcus nodded, his eyes reflecting wisdom beyond his years. Sometimes I wonder if she knew it would all end like this. She always said that true power lies in how we choose to use our knowledge. She would be proud to see what the Foundation has become. Sarah smiled, hugging the boy who had become practically a son to her. And even prouder to see the amazing young man you're becoming. James joined them, carrying a red folder similar to the one that had started the entire journey. I found this today organizing some old files, he explained, his eyes shining with contained emotion. These are Claire's original plans for Project Aurora, before Walsh distorted them. Inside the folder, drawings and notes detailed a revolutionary vision of how technology could be used to heal, not control. It was a testament to the true scientific spirit that Claire represented, page after page of research dedicated to alleviating human suffering. This is why we keep the key, James explained to Marcus, his voice heavy with emotion. Not for the power it represents, but as a reminder that true progress comes through compassion and integrity. Sarah watched father and son sharing that meaningful moment, remembering how it all began with a frightening drawing and a silent plea for help from a special student. How many lives had changed since then? How many more would still change thanks to Claire's legacy? Night was falling softly over the city, and the first stars were beginning to shine in the sky. On the horizon, the lights of the Claire Sullivan Foundation shone like a beacon of hope, a symbol of how darkness can be transformed into light when courageous people choose to make a difference. The foundation had become a center of excellence in ethical research and technological development. Scientists from around the world came to study its protocols and methodologies, taking back to their countries not just technical knowledge, but a new philosophy about how science should serve humanity. Sarah had established a scholarship program in Claire's name, allowing talented young people from underprivileged families to pursue scientific careers. The program had already graduated its first class, and the results were impressive, a new generation of researchers committed to ethics and the common good. And so, as the sun set on that day, Sarah understood that some stories don't really have an ending, they just transform into new beginnings, new chapters of hope and possibilities. The shadow of Project Aurora had dissipated, giving way to something much more luminous and meaningful. The golden key would remain guarded, its secret now part of a greater legacy, a reminder that true power lies not in control over others, but in the ability to inspire positive changes in the world. And as long as there were people willing to fight for truth and justice, that light would never fade. Marcus, Sarah, and James remained in the garden until the first stars appeared, united not just by the dramatic events they had faced, but by their shared determination to build a better future. A future where science would serve humanity, not ambition, where truth would prevail over greed, and where love and courage would continue to illuminate even the darkest nights. So, friends, what did you think of this story full of suspense, mystery, and redemption? Would you make the same choices as Sarah to protect Marcus? Did James make the right decision by trusting her? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories and hit the notification bell to be notified whenever we publish exciting new stories like this one. Your like means a lot. It helps us reach more people with narratives that make a difference. If you know someone who also loves engaging stories, don't hesitate to share. Together, we can build an even bigger community of story lovers. Until the next adventure, you won't want to miss it.